Hi, everyone. Welcome to the All Things Amyloid podcast, where we feature patients, caregivers, and clinicians who discuss amyloidosis, a rare and incurable disease. Amyloidosis occurs when the body builds up abnormal amounts of misfolded amyloid protein, which can lead to serious and life threatening outcomes. I'm your host, Mackenzie, an amyloidosis patient and founder of Mackenzie's Mission. Our goal for this podcast is to raise awareness and share firsthand what it's like to live with this disease, to care for those affected by it, and to treat it. We hope this leads to earlier diagnosis and start of treatment, which will improve patient lives. Not everyone is wired to be outgoing and assertive. For them, finding their voice to advocate for themselves may be easy. But for others, finding their voice and confidence to communicate with their healthcare team may be extremely challenging. In this episode, I'll speak with Liz, who will share her journey for finding her voice and how that has transformed her relationship with her medical team. Welcome, Liz. It's so great to have you on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. It's so great to have you, and again, thank you. In thinking about today's topic, I imagine our listeners have a wide range of self advocacy comfort levels. Those that are wired to have a strong voice, spanning to those who are just beginning to find their voice. So before your journey began, where do you think you fell on the spectrum?
Well, I think for most of my life, I hadn't really thought about needing a voice in terms of my healthcare. I was probably very passive, honestly, with my doctors. I was pretty healthy most of the time before my diagnosis, so I kind of went in and just did what they told me to do. I didn't ask a lot of questions, and I was mostly agreeable, I would say.
And then your symptoms began. And at what point did you realize that having a passive voice wasn't necessarily enough?
It was probably still before I was diagnosed, but as the symptoms were piling on, and becoming more and more of a concern to me. I think my frustration started to grow, and I wasn't getting the answers that I needed from the doctors. And I was kind of being passed from one doctor to another, which was frustrating and left me a little bit angry, honestly. So I knew that it was important to change my strategy. And I think that encouraged me to sort of find my voice. And I had to do a better job for myself as an
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just not having an answer in and of itself is extremely frustrating. So I certainly sympathize with you there. And when you started to realize that you're not happy with what's going on in terms of your medical care, what did you do?
Well, I kept going from doctor to doctor and trying to seek people that were more in the know or would be able to answer my questions. So I was trying to be more proactive with that. Um, I think as my frustration continued to build, it sort of fueled my motivation to keep searching and continue on trying to find the doctors that could give me the answers that I needed. I also learned quickly that I had to be better prepared when I went to the next
Mm,
appointment because like I said, I kind of felt like I was being passed from doctor to doctor. So when I would go, and I'm sure you know this, doctors have only a limited time to meet with you, and they don't have time always to go carefully through your chart. Certainly, if they've I had been to several specialists prior, so I would knew that I had to go in with more information for them. And by the time I was at about the fourth specialist, I knew to go in with my full history in order of what the symptoms were and what I had gone through up to that point. And I knew that I had to sort of tell them kind of what the doctors prior had done, what tests they had done, and what conclusions they had come to, and why I was still in the need for more answers.
so you say you started realizing that you need to be more prepared. And I think this is a really interesting idea. I don't know if that's necessarily the right word, but a concept, so to speak. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about what that meant for you.
Sure. I think, as patients, it's easy to just put everything in the hands of the doctors, but certainly I learned quickly that, especially getting the difficult diagnosis that I received, if I was going to have the energy and fight this sort of battle, that I needed to show strength in that, and I needed to find a louder voice or a stronger voice in my healthcare. So I started to just learn to become more assertive with my doctors, and it meant that I had to educate myself more. I think I had to educate myself more in terms of the disease process.
Mm.
Um, I had to inform myself as much as possible about like the medical vocabulary even that they were using so that I was able to ask more intelligent questions at my appointments. And I needed to be able to read and understand my chart, which was getting pretty complicated pretty quickly with all these doctors. So I had to spend some time just educating myself and understanding things clearly so that when I went into these appointments that I was well informed and I could have more intelligent, open conversations with the doctors. Um, and I thought that that would help me better understand too the process that they were going through in my healthcare and what they were saying. So overall, it was a good decision on my part to speak up for myself because I think they appreciated it more. In the end, they knew that I was more wanted to be more involved, and they were more prepared. I think when they knew I was going to ask a lot of questions about tests, about results of the tests, and decisions along the way that the doctors were proposing. So I was definitely asking a lot more questions, which I think was very important in my overall healthcare.
Yeah, I think you bring up an excellent point about by being prepared, you can ask kind of more relevant questions to your care. But I thought it was really interesting when you said that you felt like the doctors were more prepared for you, right? That they knew that you were going to come in and you were going to ask the tough questions, that you wanted answers, you wanted to know, and it almost forced their hand into being better for you. So I think that is a I'm really glad you shared that story because I think it's incredibly
Mhm.
powerful. But I'd love if you could also share a few more examples of other ways that helped you find your voice.
Just thinking of just some specific examples, and I know again this is out of the comfort zone for a lot of patients, but one example that comes to mind is that when I was going through all this, I had to have a lot of infusions, and um, my veins were getting pretty torn up, and it became very more difficult for the nurses to get my IV in. And this is just one example of speaking up for myself as my own advocate as a patient and kind of finding my voice in my health journey. But I finally realized there was only one nurse that really knew me well and knew how to do it right.
Mhm.
And so I, even at the risk of maybe offending some, and I don't even think they really took it that way. And that was another learning curve for me was that, they were more than happy to be accommodating. It was just a matter of me speaking up and saying, this person really seemed to understand where to locate vein and how to do this better. And so each time then they would just bring her in and I requested that. So that was just one example of kind of going out of my comfort zone to be my own advocate. And then I would think another good example is that I had so many different specialists. I think I probably had 9 different specialists because I was multi-organ involved disease. Um, and they were all coming at me in different directions with different, protocols and different medicines that they wanted me to take. And so I got pretty good at asking if the medications that they were proposing was just for symptom management or if it was necessary for my recovery. Because it was becoming difficult to distinguish between side effects of the different medicines versus the progression of the disease itself. So I thought it
Mhm.
was very important that we just take the medicines that were vitally necessary. And I think it caught some doctors off guard when I was questioning even taking the things they wanted to prescribe for me. So that took a little bit of assertiveness and, again, out of my comfort zone. But I think in the end, it really did help my overall healthcare. Um, and I'm trying to think of another example, like I had asked if I could switch the days that I received my chemo because I realized that my when I would get chemo, I always seemed to end up in the ICU following it, and there was not a lot of staff, and my doctor was not there on the weekends, so I asked them to like change my chemo day so that I would be able to get to the ICU in the middle of the week in case that were to come to happen. So they were very accommodating. Like I say, I think it was just more me speaking up, and overall, it ended up being a good thing for my overall health care. So,
Of course. And It's interesting. I feel like a common theme of all those stories was, one, it was difficult, uncomfortable to ask for as a patient. But another thing is it ended up being well received. And like you said, you as a patient, you don't want to offend anyone or feel like you're being a burden to them. And I think that holds us back from asking those kind of questions that you asked. But you're right. At
Mhm.
the end of the day, a lot of people are happy to accommodate your requests, and it ends up being kind of not as big of a deal as you thought it might be.
Yeah,
And so, kind of the moral of the story is ask those questions. I know they're uncomfortable, they may be difficult, but a lot of the times they're not as big a deal as you think they are, and it's worth
yeah,
a shot. Worst they can say is no, and you kind of just keep doing what you're doing.
right.
So, kind of to wrap up our conversation, just thinking about describing how your confidence in using your voice has changed from where you started in your journey to where you are today.
Oh, I definitely feel a lot more confident going into seeing my doctors. And I think a lot of that came from just educating myself and also realizing the importance of speaking up and being part of the team managing my health. Um, I think the doctors, like you said, mentioned before, it was interesting to find that now they're more prepared for me coming into the appointment. So they kind of predict the questions I'm going to ask, and they have the information ready at hand. So I feel more active in the decision making process, and it's very empowering too to feel that.
Of course, especially when a disease like this, you feel like takes so much from you, particularly in terms of your control. So having something that you know you can control, and having that empowered feeling, it can't be undervalued.
Absolutely.
So Liz, I want to thank you so much for joining us today, and sharing your thoughts and your experiences in terms of finding your voice. In closing, I want to leave you with the opportunity to offer any nuggets of advice for our listeners, or particularly maybe those patients who are just diagnosed, or struggling with their confidence in working with their care team.
Sure. I would say one just suggestion is to look at your patient doctor relationship as more of an employee employer relationship.
Mm,
And oftentimes we forget that they're doing a job for us, um, and they're working to get me healthy. And so it's great that to be respectful and friendly, of course, to our doctors and caregivers. But I think it's important that we're not really looking to befriend them necessarily. That the job is to get healthy, and especially when you're dealing with a serious and very rare disease, it can be frightening. So you want to be sure that you are treating them as somebody who's doing that job for you. So and I think it's important too to be very actively involved in the healthcare process and your own healing, and that it shouldn't be viewed as a passive relationship, but to be able to ask questions and to not be afraid. I think to speak up when you feel you don't understand something or you want clarification about things that are going on within your healthcare plan. So,
yeah, I think you've left us with a lot of really interesting things to think about in terms of finding our voice and how we can go about doing that. So for our audience, particularly those who are looking to find strength in their voice, I hope you found today's episode and Liz's experiences helpful. And but also those who may be medical providers. I hope that today's episode reminds you that patients don't all have the same level of confidence, and their ability to be fully engaged and advocates in their care can vary widely. So I ask that you are patient and encourage them to ask questions to help them find their voice, and the care journey and everyone that's involved with that will be better off. Thank you for listening to the All Things Amyloid podcast. If you find our podcast informative, please follow and share it with others. If you want to learn more about the work we're doing at Mackenzie's Mission, please visit mm713.org. We'd also like to thank AstraZeneca Pharmaceuticals, Alexion Pharmaceuticals, Alnylam Pharmaceuticals, and Bridge Biopharma for their sponsorship to help raise awareness about amyloidosis. We hope you stay tuned for future episode drops. Thanks for listening.